Have you ever wondered why some people look light even when life is heavy? Have you ever noticed that the more you try to force happiness, the more fragile it becomes? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are walking into an old and flavored story that seems playful on the surface and quietly rewires your whole relationship with effort, fate, and inner peace underneath. It is the story of three laughing monks, and if you let it land, it becomes a lesson about awakening, wisdom, cause and effect, compassion, practice, and the strange way life begins to cooperate when you stop fighting yourself. The heart of the message is simple. Your destiny is not only the events that happen to you. Your destiny is the posture of your mind while events happen, and that posture is trainable. The second heart of the message is equally sharp. When you carry everything alone, you build suffering. When you share responsibility with clarity and kindness, you build freedom. This is not motivational talk. This is karma in everyday clothes. Do a thing one way and the world responds one way. Do it another way and a different world appears. Now let us begin like a story. In a mountain town where the air smelled faintly of pine and wet stone, there was a temple that sat slightly above the village. Not far, just far enough that you had to choose to go there. The path up was made of uneven steps and small patches of dirt where rain had softened the ground. Villagers walked it for weddings, funerals, festivals, and sometimes for nothing at all. Just because something inside them was restless and they wanted quiet. The temple was known for one strange reason. 3 monks lived there, and they laughed a lot. Not the forced laughter of trying to be positive, but the kind of laughter that comes from seeing something clearly and refusing to take the ego too seriously. People said you could hear their laughter drifting down the hillside at odd hours, like wind chimes, like a river, like a reminder that life was not only a struggle. The villagers did not know what to do with that. Some admired it. Some suspected it. Some felt jealous. A few felt offended, because when you are carrying pain, someone else laughing can feel like disrespect, even if it is not. This is one of the first lessons hidden in the story. When the heart is tight, joy looks suspicious. When the heart is open, joy looks natural. The 3 monks were not identical. They were distinct like 3 seasons. The first monk was older, with a face that looked like it had watched many storms and learned to stop arguing with clouds. His eyes were bright and calm. He spoke rarely, and when he did speak, his words were simple enough to sound ordinary, until you noticed they stayed in your mind for days. The second monk was middle-aged, energetic, always moving, always doing small tasks around the temple, sweeping, carrying water, tending the garden, repairing steps. He was not restless in a nervous way. He moved like someone who had made peace with work. Work was not punishment for him. Work was practice. The third monk was younger. Not a child, but young enough to still have that playful spark that most adults lose under responsibility. He asked questions, made jokes, and sometimes laughed at the exact moment other people wanted to be taken seriously. People thought he was immature until they noticed how gently he treated everyone, including himself. Now here is how the story usually begins. The temple needed water. The spring was down the hill. Not far, but far enough that you felt it in your legs. Every day, someone had to carry buckets up the steps. The village had a well, but the temple relied on the spring. And the spring was clean and sweet. Carrying water was part of the temple rhythm, part of the practice, part of life. In the beginning, when the 3 monks first started living together, the situation was simple. When there was one monk carried water. Then the second monk arrived. 2 monks carried water together. It was easy then. One held one side of the carrying pole. The other held the other side. Their steps matched. The buckets swayed gently. The load was shared. They climbed in steady silence. And sometimes they laughed because the work felt light when it was shared. Then the third monk arrived, and that is where the lesson began. With 3 monks, you would think the work would become even easier. More hands, less burden, more presence, more support, more laughter, more lightness. But something strange happened. Each monk began assuming someone else would do it. The older monk assumed the younger ones would handle it. The middle monk assumed the older monk would assign it, or the younger monk would volunteer. The younger monk assumed the older ones had an established system. So the water run slowed, then stopped. Not because anyone was evil, not because anyone consciously decided to be selfish. It happened because of a very human mechanism: diffused responsibility. This mechanism lies everywhere. In groups, people assume someone else will speak up. In families, people assume someone else will remember. In friendships, people assume someone else will reach out. In teams, people assume someone else will fix the problem. In relationships, people assume someone else will carry the emotional work. And when responsibility becomes a fog, suffering grows quietly. One morning the monks woke up and there was no water. No water for tea. No water for cooking. No water for cleaning. No water for the simple rituals that made their life smooth. The younger monk looked at the empty jar and felt a surge of irritation. He wanted to blame. He wanted to say, "I thought you were doing it." He wanted to defend himself. He wanted to be right. The middle monk felt embarrassment. He prided himself on being diligent. And now there was a failure in the system. He wanted to fix it quickly. But he also wanted someone else to admit fault first. Because the ego likes repair only when it includes vindication. The older monk looked at the empty jar and smiled. Not a mocking smile. A clear smile. He said nothing at first. He simply sat down on the steps outside the hall and watched the two younger monks react. The younger monk said, "How did this happen?" The middle monk said, "It happened because nobody decided." The younger monk said, "I thought you were doing it." The middle monk said, "I thought you were doing it." Then both looked at the older monk. The older monk finally spoke. "You are both right, and that is why there is no water." The younger monk frowned. The older monk continued, "When you live in a group and you depend on assumptions, you will eventually depend on emptiness. When you live in a group and you depend on clarity, you create abundance." Then he laughed, softly, like someone amused by the predictable nature of the mind. The younger monk did not like being laughed at. He wanted seriousness. He wanted rules. He wanted a schedule. He wanted a system that would prevent discomfort forever. But the older monk was not laughing at them as people. He was laughing at the mind. The mind is so confident in its assumptions. The mind is so eager to protect itself. The mind is so quick to say, "Not me." This is a doorway to awakening. The moment you see how quickly you defend your self-image, you begin to see the self-image as a construction. You begin to see the ego as a habit, not as truth. The older monk stood up and said, "Let us go get water." The three walked down the hill in silence. The younger monk felt ashamed. The middle monk felt tense. The older monk felt calm. At the spring, the older monk filled one bucket. He handed it to the younger monk. Then he filled a second bucket. He handed it to the middle monk. Then he did something unexpected. He picked up the carrying pole and placed it on his own shoulders. With no bucket. The younger monk laughed nervously and asked why he was doing that. The older monk said, "Because until you learn how to share, you will not know what you are sharing." The three began climbing. 2 buckets. 3 people. At first it looked awkward. The younger monk walked too fast, splashing. The middle monk walked too slow, making the load sway. The older monk walked in the middle, holding the pole steady with his hands, not carrying the weight, but guiding the rhythm. After a few minutes, their steps synchronized. The bucket stopped splashing. The climb became smoother. Halfway up, the older monk began laughing. The younger monk asked what was funny. The older monk said, "Look at your faces. You are suffering because you are thinking about fairness instead of thinking about practice." The middle monk bristled. He said, "Fairness matters." The older monk nodded. He said fairness matters when it is guided by wisdom, but fairness becomes poison when it is guided by resentment. That line landed hard, because the middle monk realized he was not only tired from carrying water, he was tired from carrying invisible scores in his mind. I did more last time. He did less. I should not have to. Why do I always do it? That mental accounting is heavy, heavier than water. The younger monk realized his shame was also mental accounting. I look foolish. They will think I am lazy. I must prove I am good. That proving is heavy, heavier than water. The older monk pointed at the path and said, "The water is not the problem. The mind is the problem." Then he paused and said something that sounded almost like a riddle. When you carry water with the mind of a victim, you carry suffering. When you carry water with the mind of a competitor, you carry suffering. When you carry water with the mind of practice, you carry water. The younger monk said, "That is just words." The older monk said, "Then test it." So the three did a small experiment. The next day, the older monk suggested a simple arrangement. One day, one monk carries water. The next day, another monk carries. The third day, the third monk carries. Then repeat. The younger monk liked it because it felt fair. The middle monk liked it because it felt organized. The older monk liked it because it would reveal something. The first day, the younger monk carried water alone. He tried to be heroic. He carried too much. He climbed too fast. He wanted to impress. Halfway up, his arms shook. His breath became harsh. The water sloshed. He arrived at the top angry. Not at the load, but at the fact that nobody praised him. He set the bucket down and waited for someone to notice. Nobody noticed. Not because the others did not care, but because they were in their own tasks. The younger monk felt a sting. That sting was a deep lesson. If you do your practice to be seen, you will suffer when you are not seen. If you do your practice as practice, you can be unseen and still be whole. The older monk watched him and said, "You carried water and also carried a craving." The younger monk asked what craving. The older monk said, "The craving to be rewarded." The younger monk looked away, embarrassed. That night, the younger monk sat alone and realized how often he did things for applause. Not only chores, even kindness, even jokes, even helpfulness. He did not want to admit it, because he wanted to believe he was pure. But the point was not purity. The point was honesty. Honesty is the first step of awakening. The second day, the middle monk carried water. He carried with discipline, careful steps, controlled breath. He finished the task efficiently. But inside, he was thinking about how responsible he was compared to others. He was building an identity as the reliable one. When he arrived at the top, he felt a subtle pride. Pride felt good for a moment. Then it felt isolating. Because pride separates you from people. It creates a wall. I am the responsible one. They are not. That wall is heavy. The older monk watched him and said, "You carried water and also carried a story." The middle monk asked what story. The older monk said, "The story that being better will make you safe." The middle monk did not want to hear that, but he could not deny it. He had been building safety through superiority. That night, he noticed how superiority always required comparison, and comparison always required someone else to be below. That is not peace. That is a fragile throne. The third day, the older monk carried water. He moved slowly, not because he was weak, but because he was present. He noticed the sound of the spring. He noticed the feel of the pole. He noticed the breath. He noticed the sun on his face. He noticed fatigue or eyes, and he did not fight it. He adjusted posture. He noticed thoughts arise, and he did not obey them. He returned to the steps. He arrived at the top and set the water down gently. Then he laughed. The younger and middle monk asked why he was laughing. The older monk said, "Because I did not carry anything extra." That sentence became the core of the whole story. Not carrying anything extra. Extra means resentment. Extra means comparison. Extra means the need to be praised. Extra means the fear of being judged. Extra means the demand that life be fair before you can be peaceful. Peace does not require fairness to begin. Peace requires awareness to begin. Then, the older monk said, "Now we will change the method again." The younger monk groaned. He wanted a fixed system. The older monk said, "We will carry water together again, but not because the load requires it, because the mind requires it." The younger monk did not understand. The older monk said, "When one carries alone, the ego can build a private story. When you carry together, the story becomes visible. Your impatience becomes visible. Your need to control becomes visible. Your need to be right becomes visible. And when it becomes visible, you can practice." This is the Buddhist path hidden in a simple chore. Practice is not reserved for meditation cushion. Practice is how you breathe when you are annoyed. Practice is how you speak when you feel misunderstood. Practice is how you move when you feel tired. Practice is how you respond when someone disappoints you. Practice is how you carry water. The three monks began carrying together in a new way. This time, they carried one bucket, not two. One bucket, three monks. The younger monk thought this was inefficient. The middle monk thought it was impractical. The older monk thought it was perfect. They placed the bucket on the pole. The older monk held the pole in the center. The younger monk held the pole near the front. The middle monk held the pole near the back. Now the load was lighter for each. But the real point was not weight distribution. The point was relationship. As they walked, the younger monk began to hurry. The buckets weighed. The older monk said, "Slow." The younger monk felt irritation. He wanted to say, "I am just being efficient." The older monk said, "Notice the irritation." The younger monk tried to swallow it. The older monk said, "Do not swallow it. See it." The younger monk asked what he meant. The older monk said, "Irritation is not your enemy. Irritation is your teacher. It tells you where you are attached to control." The middle monk began to tighten his grip, trying to keep the bucket steady by force. The older monk said, "Soften." The middle monk felt fear. He thought softening meant losing control. The older monk said, "Soft is responsive. Hard is brittle." The middle monk tried softening. The bucket steadied. Halfway up, they all started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was clear. They saw that most suffering was extra. Extra tension, extra story, extra identity, extra urgency, extra blame. They saw how often they made life harder than it needed to be. Not because life demanded it, but because the mind demanded it. This is awakening. Awakening is seeing the unnecessary. When you see the unnecessary, you can release it. Release is freedom. Now the story deepens because the village hears about what is happening. Villagers start coming to watch the monks carry water. Some came out of curiosity. Some came because they were tired of their own family conflicts. Some came because they wanted to learn why these monks laughed so much. One day a villager named Hannah approached the monks and asked a direct question. She asked, "Why are you always laughing? Life is hard. People get sick. Money is stressful. Relationships are painful. How can you laugh?" The younger monk started to answer with a joke, but the older monk held up a hand. The older monk said, "We laugh because we see what is real and what is extra." Hannah asked what he meant. The older monk said, "Pain is real. Suffering is often extra." Hannah did not like that. She said her pain felt like suffering. The older monk nodded. He said, "Yes, because the mind adds a second arrow." Hannah asked what that meant. The older monk said, "The first arrow is what happened. The second arrow is what you add." Hannah said, "What do I add?" The older monk said, "Blame, shame, and the story that you are alone." Hannah felt tears rise, not because she suddenly became weak, but because she recognized herself. She had been carrying everything alone. Not only chores, emotional burdens, family expectations, worries about the future, quiet resentments. The older monk pointed to the water bucket and said, "Life is like this. If you carry it alone while also carrying resentment, you will break. If you carry it with others while also carrying clarity, you will strengthen. And if you carry it with magnificence, you may still feel weight, but you will not be crushed by extra suffering." Hannah asked how to practice. The older monk said, "Start where you are." He asked Hannah to remember one conflict from the last week. Hannah described an argument with her sister about responsibilities at home. The older monk asked what the argument was really about. Hannah said it was about chores. The older monk smiled and said, "It was about being seen." Hannah froze. The older monk said, "Most arguments are not about the surface. They are about the invisible need underneath. Respect, recognition, safety, love." He asked Hannah, "When you feel unseen, what do you do?" Hannah admitted she becomes sharp. The older monk said, "That sharpness is your way of trying to protect your worth, but it often harms connection, which is what you actually want." He then offered a simple practice. When you feel unseen, breathe once, feel the body, and speak the need without the weapon. Hannah asked if that would work. The older monk said, "It will work in you first. The world may still be messy, but your karma will be cleaner." Karma again. Cause and effect. Speak with a weapon and you create fear. Speak with clarity and you create possibility. Carry resentment and you create exhaustion. Carry magnificence and you create space. Hannah went home and tried. The next time her sister criticized her, Hannah felt he tries. Old Hannah would have attacked back. New Hannah took one breath. She said, "I hear you. I want us to share this fairly. And I also want you to see how much I have been carrying." Her sister went quiet, not because the sister instantly became perfect, but because the tone changed the field. The conversation became possible. That is the power of practice. Now, back at the temple, the three monks continued their water routine. Seasons changed. In the dry season, the spring ran slower. In the wet season, the steps became slippery. Sometimes the bucket was heavier. Sometimes the path was harder. Life did not become a perfect path, but their relationship to the path transformed. And that is the real secret. Inner peace is not the removal of difficulty. Inner peace is the end of inner war. The younger monk gradually stopped needing applause. He still enjoyed being seen, because that is human. But he stopped being controlled by the craving. He learned to do work quietly, then walk away without checking who noticed. That is freedom from attachment. The middle monk gradually stopped needing superiority. He still valued responsibility, but he stopped using it to build a wall. He learned to ask for help without shame and to offer help without resentment. That is compassion with wisdom. The older monk continued being what he had always been, a mirror that reflects the mind back to itself gently. One day, a storm came, a heavy storm. Rain made the path a river. Wind shook the trees. The spring water was still there, but reaching it was risky. The younger monk suggested skipping water that day. The middle monk suggested rationing what they had. Both suggestions sounded practical. The older monk listened, then said, "We will go together." They wrapped their robes tighter, stepped onto the path, and moved slowly. The younger monk slipped once. The middle monk caught him. The younger monk laughed, half fear, half relief. The middle monk felt his heart pound. He realized how much he cared. The older monk said, "Notice, in danger you become one body." They reached the spring, filled the bucket, and began climbing. The wind pushed. The bucket swayed. They tightened their grip. Then the older monk said, "Soften." The middle monk almost snapped. "This is not the time." The older monk said, "It is always the time." He said, "If you become rigid, you will fall. If you become responsive, you will adapt. The middle monk breathed and softened slightly. The younger monk matched the pace. They moved like one organism. They made it to the temple. Inside, they made tea. Steam rose. The younger monk took a sip and laughed. The middle monk took a sip and laughed. The older monk took a sip and laughed. Hannah happened to be visiting that day. She watched them and asked again, "Why are you laughing?" The older monk said, "Because we carried the storm without carrying extra fear." Hannah said she saw fear on their faces. The older monk nodded. He said, "Fear is natural. Extra is optional." This is a profound lesson. You will feel fear. You will feel sadness. You will feel anger. You will feel uncertainty. The path is not to erase these. The path is to stop adding unnecessary story, unnecessary hatred, unnecessary self-attack. That is how you reduce suffering. Now we bring the story into your life. Most of us have our own water bucket. Your water bucket might be school pressure. It might be family responsibilities. It might be social anxiety. It might be loneliness. It might be the desire to prove yourself. It might be a relationship that feels heavy. It might be the fear of the future. You carry it every day. The question is, what else are you carrying? Are you carrying resentment? Are you carrying the need to be praised? Are you carrying comparison? Are you carrying the story that you are alone? Are you carrying shame? Are you carrying the belief that if you are not perfect, you are nothing? Those are extra, and extra is optional. Optional does not mean easy to drop instantly. It means droppable through practice. Practice looks like this. When you feel irritation, you pause and feel the body. When you feel blamed, you breathe before you speak. When you feel the urge to keep score, you notice the scorekeeper and soften. When you feel lonely, you stop pretending you do not need connection and you reach out cleanly. When you make a mistake, you correct it without cruelty. This is how you clean karma. Karma is not a threat. Karma is a map. You do not need to hate yourself. You need to see clearly. Seeing clearly is awakening. Awakening naturally gives rise to compassion. Compassion for yourself because you see the old habit patterns. Compassion for others because you see they are also driven by habits. Compassion with boundaries because wisdom is not naive. The three laughing monks story is not telling you to be passive. It is telling you to be awake. Awake means you stop being dragged by group assumptions. Awake means you stop waiting for someone else to do the inner work. Awake means you take responsibility for your own mind. And when you do, something surprising happens. Your outer life begins to reorganize. Not always instantly, but steadily. Because your choices become clearer. Your boundaries become cleaner. Your energy becomes less scattered. Your presence becomes steadier. Steady presence is magnetic. It attracts better cooperation. It attracts more honest relationships. It attracts opportunities that match your values. Not because the universe is bribing you, but because you are finally living in alignment. Now let me close by offering the deepest part of the lesson. The three monks laughed because they stopped treating life as a personal attack. They stopped treating chores as humiliation. They stopped treating fairness as a weapon. They stopped treating responsibility as a burden carried alone. They treated everything as practice. When you treat everything as practice, you become resilient. When you become resilient, you stop fearing impermanence as much. When you stop fearing impermanence as much, you can love more cleanly. Clean love is compassion, and compassion is the highest form of strength. If this story resonated with you, share your own water bucket in the comments. What is one responsibility you are carrying right now? And what extra story have you been carrying with it? Also tell me one small way you could practice sharing, or practicing mindfulness, or dropping the extra weight this week. If you want more long-form stories like this that turn simples and lessons into real-life wisdom about awakening, karma, compassion, and practice, subscribe to the channel. Like the video. and stay with us. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.